From Redox and Healthcare Strategy Bullpen, welcome to Diagnosing Healthtech.
Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Jeff Englander. I'm the founder and principal of Healthcare Strategy Bullpen. I am delighted to welcome you to this episode of Diagnosing Healthtech. I wanted to welcome my co-host, Elizabeth Ojo. Elizabeth is a licensed pharmacist who has many years implementing EMRs. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, Jeff. Really glad to be back. Hi, everyone. Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Redox, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Is it hot as it is here on the East Coast in Atlanta?
Oh yes. I'm very thankful for the cloudy days that we get occasionally. But yeah, it's just another sweltering summer that we're dealing with.
It is hot here. I'm in Connecticut, and in the metro area, we're touching 100, which is unusual for us.
We haven't been there yet. I think we've been 98 so far, but I'll let you know once we hit 100.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Baxter Lee of Clearwater Security. Baxter is the CFO. He's been CFO since 2018. Prior to Clearwater, Baxter was CFO of Entrada Health, which is a mobile health and documentation productivity platform for healthcare providers, which was acquired by NextGen in 2017. Before that, before his role with Entrada, Baxter held multiple positions with Change Healthcare, which was at that time known as MDON. And he was CFO of the Ambulatory and Payer Services, as well as other divisions, including the Director of Corporate Development. Baxter graduated with honors from the Executive MBA program from the Owen Graduate School of Management down there at Vanderbilt in Nashville. And he also holds his undergraduate degree in business administration from Washington and Lee in St. Louis. So welcome, Baxter.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, happy to be here and talk with you guys today. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. So Baxter, this seems to be the story that just won't quit. Cybersecurity and hacks. We've had a couple of different guests on about this, and it just keeps coming back, kind of the gift that keeps on giving. So can you talk to us, obviously Change Healthcare was in the news with that attack. Since that time, there's been other additional attacks. Most noteworthy has been Ascension. What is behind the attacks on Change and Ascension? And they seem to be getting, bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, healthcare has been an increasing target for cyber attackers for the past several years. I think for about 4 years in a row now, healthcare is the most targeted industry for cyber attacks of any industry in the world, frankly. So, operating a healthcare business today comes with a significant amount of risk. I think part of that is due to, a lot of, everyone that's been in healthcare for the last couple of decades have been a part of the big wave of technology adoption, the implementation of EMRs and all the technologies that we've put on top of that. That's created quite a web of systems and an increase in the amount of data that's being created, and then an increase in the exchange of that data between parties within healthcare. And so as a result of all that, that's creating a lot of vulnerabilities and opportunities for, bad actors to come and gain access to healthcare. I think, unfortunately, as part of that wave of technology investment, there was sort of a lack of appreciation for investing in appropriate security controls in a commensurate amount and way that would keep up with the technology adoption. So you actually have a scenario where there's quite a bit of vulnerabilities and easier access within the healthcare industry to access the very valuable information that exists within our industry relative to other industries, right? So you have valuable data with easy access, and you have critical systems that are very likely to be significant disruptions if they were taken offline. So you're more likely to pay a ransom in a scenario of a ransom attack So the combination of those factors has really made healthcare an attractive target for cyber attackers, and you're seeing that unfold in very significant ways this year through the Change Healthcare and the Ascension breaches, among others that we've seen this year. But those were two notable ones for sure.
Yeah, and
Great.
just quickly add to
Go
that,
ahead,
Baxter.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, great point, Baxter. And I just want to put a fine point on it, right? Within healthcare, the consequences are literally life or death, right? And the
Yeah.
increasingly reliance that providers have, not just on their electronic health records, but on the real-time exchange of data, as they're increasingly relying on that. Anytime that kind of input or data exchange gets interrupted, I mean, we can immediately see the consequences. If hackers are attacking a financial institution, you can get your money back, right? You can't really get your life back if it's being interrupted. So obviously, these health systems are being put in such a vulnerable position. They're trying to get back, online as soon as possible, regardless of how they can get there. So I think that just makes them a really, really ripe target for these users.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. Continue.
Oh, no, I'm finished.
Okay. So Baxter, you mentioned, ransomware, just so everybody's on a level playing field, what is ransomware and why in particular is it such a big threat in healthcare?
Yeah, ransomware is a form of malware, so to speak, that's deployed basically with the intent of locking users out of their systems and preventing them from accessing the information within those systems, so that they're then they're holding it hostage or extorting the organization for money in order to be able to regain access to those systems. And so if you do not have backup protocols to be able to roll back and restore on your own, then generally the only way to get access back to your systems is to get the encryption keys from the attackers that have launched this technology into your system. And so it's the rise of Bitcoin and the anonymity associated with cryptocurrencies is also fueling this, as well as you've got sort of more nefarious, attackers that are backed by adversaries of the United States. So you have groups that are supported and harbored in countries like Russia and North Korea and others that have more flexibility to operate in nefarious ways. And so you've got this sort of collaboration going on of people that want to not just extort for money, which is really the early wave of ransomware was really criminal enterprises really accessing launching ransomware for financial purposes, right? And 9 times out of 10, you paid the ransom, you got your information back, they went on to the next group, right? And it was sort of not that big of a deal. Now you're looking at organizations that have much more nefarious intentions of causing significant disruption within the U.S. economy. You go back to 2021 with the Colonial Pipeline attack. I mean, those types of attacks, and then Change Healthcare this year, those are clearly intended to cause mass disruption within our economy, and less for financial gain and more for the impact that they can have on our economy and our infrastructure. And so you're seeing more and more of that today. You also have a network of these organizations. I mean, these are businesses. They have employees, they have systems and processes, and in some cases, HR and benefits. And then they license that technology out to a network of attackers that can then use that technology with all the scripts and codes and information they need to send out. And then they just take a fee. So they call it ransomware as a service. They take a percentage of the fees that are collected through that ransomware capability. So the ability for them to distribute that and grow it, across, the dark web to people that want to be a part of this is just growing every day. And so you're seeing, again, healthcare being the most targeted industry for ransom attacks. And a growing amount of threats, every day. We're seeing unprecedented amounts of ransom attacks on the U.S. healthcare system in the past year. It's just going up exponentially.
Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add too. I mean, the insidious nature of these sort of networks as well, and any sort of, let's say, state sponsored group, is not only do they have larger resources to call upon to execute these attacks, but they also have the resiliency to hold out longer, right? And make larger demands, and be more resilient to giving in to whatever their victims are asking for, right? They're able to hold out longer, and like you said, it's not just a financial motive, right? It's more about seeding chaos and disrupting the organizations or the countries in which these organizations are held in, because if the country doesn't have their health, what do they have, right?
Absolutely. And, a couple of things happening, right? So you've got the disruption that can cause. You have folks like China who are playing the long game in terms of accessing our medical information in order to control drug development and the markets around that in the future. And then, you have all the criminal enterprises that just want, the money, but you're starting to see them become more and more sophisticated, these ransomware groups, with launching things like double and triple extortion. So, and not just, holding your data hostage, but actually exfiltrating that data. So you get the encryption keys back, but then they have the information and they're still threatening to put it on the dark web or release it publicly if you don't pay them additional fees down the road. So they're getting more and more sophisticated in how they're attacking. You can't, even if you have good backups, in some cases, they can still take the data and then they threaten to publicly release it and extort you that way. They're also, extorting the executives personally with their personal information as a third level to really put pressure on them to make the decision to pay the ransom. So it's just getting increasingly more aggressive in terms of how these people are operating. So, frankly, the industry needs to really respond with a more dedicated focus around security and recognize these threats and the challenges that the healthcare environment poses with the more aggressive threats that we're seeing out there today.
So Baxter, let me ask you a follow-up, and I'm also remiss in not giving you a chance to introduce Clearwater and what they do. So maybe you could kind of weave that in here. One of the things is there's been some debate, it was reported and it seemed to be verified that Change paid about $21 million in ransomware. And there's been a debate about the government, preferring that people don't pay the ransomware, which is, as you referenced, typically paid in crypto. So it's very difficult to follow. So can you talk about, a little bit about that debate about paying the ransomware, and then take a step back and talk a little bit about, Clearwater, what Clearwater does and how Clearwater helps organizations? Because as I said, I didn't give you a chance to do that, and I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Clearwater, we are a healthcare-focused cybersecurity consulting advisory solutions company. So we help organizations really understand where they are with their cybersecurity strategy and put plans and programs in place to get them to a level of maturity and sophistication that helps them compete in this market that we're just talking about. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but generally speaking, we help you get to where you want to be. And a lot of organizations are struggling to keep up with the threats, lack of internal resources, lack of internal know-how, budget, et cetera. And we can come in with cost-effective solutions to help you get to that higher state of sophistication and maturity, so you can properly, run your business and feel good about your security and compliance programs. Going back to sort of the Change situation and sort of the other part of your question, what we're seeing in the industry is really sort of, the blocking and tackling is not happening, right? So with Change in particular, they gained access through credentials that they were able to steal and then get into a server and set of systems that didn't have MFA implemented on them. So likely they had MFA on most of their systems, but unfortunately, this particular system did not have MFA. The hackers were able to get in there and operate and move around undetected for over 9 days before they launched their ransomware attack, which ensured that they could really deploy this ransom technology to shut down as many systems as possible, and they were able to take down over 100 systems offline that Optum had to pull offline as a result, and now are rebuilding them from scratch, from the ground up. So the cost associated with this is quite significant. And unfortunately, they clearly did not have good backups or good incident response procedures as an organization, because we're now 4 months into this, and even on United's website, you can go see which systems are back online, which ones are in progress, which ones are still not fully functional. And over 60% of the systems, or only 60% of the systems, are fully restored 4 months later at this point. So, quite a significant attack there. And, a lot of things go into that, but really, you making sure the blocking and tackling is done, that you have the correct controls in place on your systems. You have good backups, you have good incident response plans, you know how to handle your downtime procedures and what that's going to look like and how quickly you can recover from these situations. Ascension being a very similar situation, an employee unwittingly downloaded a malicious file, took down the IT systems across 140 hospitals, so their pharmacy systems, their EMR, their lab systems. It's taken over a month for them to recover from those. And again, I think another situation where clearly they didn't have strong incident response plans and capabilities to recover, not only to detect the attack quickly and shut it down, but when it happened, to be able to recover quickly and minimize the impact of that. So both situations have been quite significant.
Yeah, and it wasn't just last week that they finally got their EMR back up for almost all their hospitals.
Yeah, supposedly, that's what we're hearing. The stories from within the environment are quite. NPR just had an article yesterday interviewing several nurses and doctors within the organization of the challenges of operating from paper-based processes and the lack of access to labs and tests and things, and the potential for medication errors and procedure errors that clearly could have significant patient harm. Elizabeth, as you mentioned earlier, healthcare is life or death in a lot of ways, and cybersecurity now is clearly having direct impacts on patient safety. They're diverting ambulances to different hospitals, which is obviously delaying the access to care in an emergency situation. They're rescheduling and deferring, or they were rescheduling and deferring elective procedures. But if that's you as a patient and you're ready for that surgery, it's probably not a great feeling when you have to kick it out a couple months or reschedule it. So there's significant impacts. And then there was a story in that article about a nurse almost giving a life-threatening dose of a medication to a baby that he thought he misread the paperwork, and he went back and double checked it and avoided the error, but it could have absolutely happened and been quite significant. So there's a huge patient safety aspect to all of this.
Yeah, that's amazing. Elizabeth?
Yeah, and I've said this before, the patient record is the single most lucrative thing that hackers are going to want, right? It has not just patient's health, which is ripe for blackmail, right, and selling on the dark web, but it also has financial information about that patient, social information about that patient. Where else? It's basically the golden record, right? So we know that health systems aren't going to stop treating their patients. They're also not going to stop wanting to seek innovative new digital health solutions. And we know these attacks aren't going to stop. So I'm wondering, from your expertise, Baxter, how can health systems work with digital health companies to sort of help make themselves more resilient to these attacks? Because like you said, even if most of their systems are well protected, it just takes one vulnerability or opportunity for them to get in, and that's it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the third-party risk or vendor risk, the vendors that these organizations are working with are causing, are creating a lot of risk, because they're generally smaller, less sophisticated organizations. So a digital health, company it may not be as sophisticated as the hospitals that they're serving, right? That by nature, they're just smaller organizations. And so that's where a lot of the risk exists in the environment. HCA had a breach last year, but it wasn't HCA that got hacked. It was their vendor for backup data storage that got hacked. But it was their name on the notices that went out to all the patients, right? And so I think hospitals are being much more diligent around understanding the vendors that they're partnering with and making sure that those vendors have good security and compliance programs and protocols in place to manage effectively in this market. The 2/3 of the patient records that were breached last year in healthcare came through vendors. Even though it was about 1/3 of the number of breaches overall. So you can get a sense of twice as amount of the information is coming from the vendor breaches as they are from direct attacks on providers. So it's a pretty significant risk. And I think we're seeing, a couple of things that have to happen. One, just having a more security awareness within the organization, elevating your CISO to a point of authority within the organization, not having that security function being buried in the IT department, but actually giving it its appropriate level of priority within the organization. We're seeing that happen more with hospitals and bringing people in as CISOs from outside of healthcare that have experience with larger enterprise organizations like financial services and things of that nature coming into healthcare. So that's a positive step in the right direction. Vendor risk management, as I mentioned, so putting more pressure on their vendors to demonstrate their security and compliance. We do a lot of work with both hospitals and their vendors, as well as helping hospitals assess their vendors. So we kind of work on both sides of the equation, and we see where a lot of the challenges exist. And generally, the technology companies, they're trying to move fast. They're trying to develop the technology. They're trying to grow their business. There's a need to increase their investment in the security and have in the security area and have a more comprehensive security program and have good protections and programs in place to manage that. So I think there's a number of things happening. Certainly these breaches this year are causing a lot more focus and more conversations around that. But finally, the last thing I would say is, a good risk management program, whether you're a vendor or a hospital, really comes down to knowing your systems and knowing where data resides and how it's flowing through your systems and applications. And there's a very particular set of guidelines around risk analysis within the HIPAA security rule, which really outlines how this should happen, how this should work. And it's been a shortcoming of healthcare for years, where when there is an incident that OCR, which is the Office for Civil Rights, is the sort of enforcement body for HHS for the HIPAA rules. When they look at organizations that have had a breach and they have a corrective action plan for that organization as a result of some sort of shortcoming, 9 times out of 10, it's failure to perform an adequate risk analysis. And what that means is you really have to have an inventory of your systems. You have to know where your data resides and then understand the controls around those systems. Do you have MFA on all your systems? Do you have appropriate protections? And then you have to model out the threat and vulnerability scenarios that could exploit those systems. So what vulnerabilities exist? What are the threats in the market that could exploit them? And score all that through an appropriate risk calculation so that you can understand where your risk resides. And then that becomes the foundation of your security program. That has been an area that healthcare has not done a good job in. And that's where we help a lot of our customers, whether you're a vendor or a hospital, really understand your landscape, understand your systems at a system level, and do that appropriate level of analysis. So you could then know, hey, we don't have MFA here. We don't have certain controls to protect these systems, and we need to make those investments.
So you've mentioned MFA, multi-factor authentication, several times. It's come up with respect to change as well. Do you think that people are looking at that as a kind of panacea, and is that a mistake?
Yeah, I mean, look, MFA has been around for a long time, right? And I think it's just like any technology, right? It gets adopted, but it doesn't get fully, deployed. So I think clearly in the situation change, it was probably in a large percentage of their systems. It is not the end all be all, but it is a way to, put, some extra security control around accessing systems and validating that the user is who they say they are. So it is a great, one of many security controls that are necessary for, a good security program, but it's definitely not the end all be all.
Are there others that you think people are either overlooking, or you mentioned risk analysis? Are there other kind of specific steps that you would take, in addition to like MFA, physical access controls, other things like that you think people? What I'm wondering, I guess, is you talked about people are using more outside vendors, but also we have healthcare moving more towards remote patient monitoring, virtual care. You've got more and more people accessing the network from outside. And as we move to a kind of more, what we talked about last week is an omnichannel network, are there other steps that you think health organizations are going to make them that are going to make health organizations particularly vulnerable, and that they need to kind of think of, from day one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a lot of discussion happening at the federal level through the different agencies, as well as through the Senate and Congress, around potentially implementing or requiring minimum standards for cybersecurity within healthcare. Mm-hmm. There's a working group of government and industry folks called that released a guidelines called the 405D hiccup, which stands for Health Industry Cybersecurity Practices, and there's guidelines within that within that document around addressing the top 5 threats in healthcare and what controls sets organizations need to have in place if you're small, medium, or large, in order to combat those threats. There's actually a lot of information and guidelines that are coming out constantly around what a good environment, set of controls, and what your environment should look like to properly protect this. And we're seeing more of that moving towards what's potentially going to be a minimum set of standards that are going to be required to operate in healthcare. We're not there yet today. Everything is more or less voluntary, and even the HIPAA rules are haven't been a proactive enforcement mechanism. There's not an audit function. We're also seeing, though, the HHS has released recently comments around launching an audit program around HIPAA. And then, within HIPAA, there's the security rule, which very clearly outlines a lot of these protections, like the risk analysis that I mentioned, as well as other technical and non-technical assessments that you need to do on your organization to comply with those rules and protect the data that you're entrusted with. So there is a lot out there already. If you just followed the HIPAA rules and you follow the 405D hiccup guidelines, there's plenty of best practices to follow. The challenge is, do you have the people on staff to really understand and to know what to do and how to do it and how it applies to your organization? Or do you need bring in a partner that can help you do that? Either way, it needs to be a priority. It needs to be something that the board and the C-suite are taking seriously, and telling that, allocating the investments and allocating the resources to do the things that they're supposed to be doing, and not necessarily take it for granted.
So, and I'll turn over to Elizabeth in a second for her question. When one of the things I see is a lot of times you'll say, oh, as a consultant, you see people who say, oh, no, we've got this under control, we can handle this ourselves. And I assume, kind of maybe a little bit of a self-serving question, but you see that as well in security. What are some of the instances where you talk to people and you get the response, oh, we've got this under control, we can handle this, and then 4, 5, 6 months later, you're coming back in trying to help them? Where are there situations where maybe people don't have as good a handle on it, and you end up in the end coming to help them? And where might people think about, oh, okay, we don't have these resources that we think we have?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a varying degree of confidence within the industry. Personally, I don't believe anybody should go to bed at night, fully confident that they're fully protected and have zero risk
Totally
in their
agree with that.
right. And so when I hear people say, "Hey, we've got that taken care of," that kind of sets, my spider senses go off that maybe they're not as protected as they say they are, and it's really they have their head in the sand and aren't as aware of what they should be doing. Those customers that are worried and saying, "Hey, I worry about this and I worry about that," they're actually probably more secure and better protected than the ones that say they are. And we hear that a lot. There's a lot of sort of negligence, I guess, in terms of just understanding what's required. And I'll hear, certainly within the more of the specialty provider, private equity community. Oh, we've got a great CIO and he's been in healthcare a long time and they understand security and HIPAA. Well, that's one person that may or may not have enough bandwidth on their team to really address what we're talking about here. And so, do they actually have the time and energy and the resources to commit to having an effective security program? Or are you just trusting a person to say that they're doing what they should be doing? So how do you validate that? And that's where I think the board needs to be more involved in really wanting, like anything, good reporting and good documentation and understanding where you are on your roadmap. I mean, frankly, no one is as mature as they want to be, right? You're always striving for something. Security and compliance are never, it's never one and done. It's a journey constantly, right? You do one thing, there's always the next thing to do. So, and we look at it from a maturity lens, right? So let's figure out where you are today, and let's determine where you want to be in the next year, 2 or 3 from a maturity level. And let's constantly improve on that scale and help you mature over time, because there's always more you can do. And if you're taking that mindset, then you're really thinking about you're never really fully trusting that you're fully protected, and you're always kind of thinking about what could be around the corner and what the next threat could be, and making sure your organization is adapting appropriately.
Elizabeth, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, no. Well, I just wanted to add, Baxter's obviously the expert here, and something that you said earlier that really resonated with me was this idea that the responsibility of cybersecurity can't just lie with the security team, right? The entire organization really needs to adopt a culture of security around everything that they do. And I think the way to do that, to engage the C-suite, to the average provider, to the average employee at the vendor, is to really articulate that cybersecurity is patient safety, right?
Mhm.
There's 2 things that I think every single person in healthcare cares about. It's patient safety and obviously financial sense. And those 2 things, when you can connect the pieces for people, I think it really gets the point across, right? If the executive team are implementing these wonderful new structures that keep attacks at bay, nothing's 100%, but if they keep it at bay, but they don't have the buy-in of the average employee or the average provider, we all know that the average person doesn't, they're going to find ways to get around it that are even more dangerous. But when you can connect the importance of cybersecurity to the very patients who are sitting in front of them, and you can really make it part of their mission that, as important as it is for you to show up to work and to dispense that medication, or as important as it is for you to show up to work and write that code that helps, improve the telemedicine, it is just as important to be really rigorous with your 2-factor authentication, to really make sure that you are thinking of security in every step of the way. I think implementing that kind of culture really, really, really goes a long way. It's not optional. It's just as important as you delivering the care to the patient, honestly.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I would say, I mean, most people are in healthcare, whether you're a provider or you're a vendor that's building a technology for healthcare. You're largely doing it because of the mission of healthcare and wanting to make healthcare better and help patients and improve outcomes. And and so cybersecurity has to be a part of that, right? If you're mission driven in terms of improving the industry and improving the lives of the patients that rely on the industry, you have to take security seriously, and you have to be part of the ethos of every organization. And I think we're unfortunately your several big headline events are now finally getting folks' attention. I mean, look, it was, one email that that got through, at Change and Ascension that led to something very significant. So it's every employee, it's every, endpoint, and then making sure you have the right level of detection and response capabilities within your organization. So you have prevention. There's all kinds of prevention you can do, but can you detect? And I think that also is a big focus here. And you can see with the Change example, 9 days in their organization before they realized that the attackers were in their network. Healthcare is of all, IBM does a report every year. Healthcare takes longer than any other industry to find attackers when they're in their system. So going back to the data is incredibly valuable. They don't have great detection capabilities, right? They're able to get in and move laterally and do significant damage. So it absolutely has to be part of the culture. You have to have the prevention capabilities. You have to have the detection capabilities and also the response capabilities to be able to recover and mitigate the impact of these things to keep them from impacting patients as we're seeing through these recent large breaches.
Yeah, and and to second what Elizabeth said and what you said so well is one of the greatest vulnerabilities is in any system is the people and the people themselves. Yep. And if they're not trained, if they're not following it, if they don't feel the ability to make themselves vulnerable and say, "Hey, I made a mistake," and come to the security people, right off the bat, I think that's key. So we will post the document that Baxter referenced.
I'll send you the link and we can post it out there for everyone.
That would be great. Anything else that we missed that we should be talking about that we're not, Baxter?
No, I think, look, we've covered a lot. But yeah, I mean, if you're an executive out there in healthcare, you should be asking these questions. Do we have the right protections in place? Do we have the right capabilities to detect or respond in a situation? And do we have the response capabilities to recover quickly? And if you don't get great answers to those questions, then you need to make further investments. And so, make it a part of your ongoing management reporting and board reporting, and make it visible for everybody so that it can be part of your, the ethos of your business, just like, everything else you do. Make it visible and manage to that. And, if we can be helpful, certainly Clearwater would love to be a resource for you. There's lots of educational and other content on our website for folks to learn more, or reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to connect you to the right people at Clearwater.
Well, thank you, Baxter. We were talking before the show about some of our favorite foods. Baxter is in a food haven down in Nashville, and Elizabeth, likes Hattie B's, hot chicken, and I am a fan of Martin's barbecue. So I'm not going to get to Martin's until October when I'm down there again. But wish you a very happy July 4th, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and look forward to connecting over some barbecue when you're down here next, Jeff.
Oh, I would love that. I will be down for the healthcare sessions in October, and we'll definitely we'll hit up for some good barbecue.
That'd be great. Well, thank you.
Elizabeth, I promise I'll bring you some Hattie B's. I'll ship it to you.
I'll hold you to that.
Okay.
Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Max.
you.
All right.
Well, we are going to transition to our discussion article section. And for our discussion articles today, we're going to talk about two articles. One is from the Axios, and the Axios article was talking about, the Axios article was talking about what retailers might do next in healthcare. And the Axios article was talking about the struggles that retailers have had in healthcare, getting patients to switch from their existing healthcare to providers that are in retail organizations. Talked about Walgreens with their almost $7 billion write-down of Village MD. Talked about what has happened at Walmart, where they shut their 51 clinics and spent over $250,000. Also with Dollar General shutting down DocGo. We talked about that last podcast with Marcus Osborne, who had helped start Walmart Health, which was super interesting. I suggest people check that out. And the article did posit that this was just an evolution a little bit, and that some of these retailers would be looking more towards partnerships, and also would be looking more towards some of what we typically refer to as self-pay, so dental, vision, weight loss. Wondered if you had any thoughts on the article, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think to summarize my reaction is this wasn't a huge surprise to me. I think lots of huge, very, very successful organizations who don't get their start in healthcare look at the world and they think, what can we do? What is a problem that we can solve? And then they think, let's get into healthcare, not really understanding or not being able to appreciate just how complex it is. And the fact that it requires such a huge, huge, huge investment up front that I don't think really plays well with the idea of monthly or quarterly profits, right, that shareholders are used to receiving. And this is not the first time it's happened. This, for example, is not Amazon's first foray into healthcare, and they're scaling back some of what they're doing. I think it's a shame. Obviously, I'm always for patients having more options and more convenient options where they can find them, and I'm happy to see that retailers are shifting towards maybe more partnerships and maybe offering options for those things that insurance maybe doesn't traditionally pay. But overall, I mean, I feel like every decade or so, right, we have these giants that enter healthcare wanting to overhaul everything. And then they realize, wait a minute, this is actually really hard. And then they lower their investments and kind of switch attention. I'm curious to know what you thought of it.
I agree. The one thing that I think is different is I was talking with someone last week, and one thing that I think happens is healthcare often doesn't do a good job, particularly hospitals and others, in shutting down things quickly. And I think that's one of the difference you see between some of the non-traditional players, the Walmart, the Amazons, is if it's not working, they do shut some of these things down quickly. But I will agree with you, as I don't think that some of these organizations understand the amount of investment it takes, the amount of time, and it's on the neighborhood of multiple years. And I do think that you will see a combination of the partnerships, which you referenced, but also you will see a number of these organizations. I think, talking about Optum, they shut down their virtual care business, but I do think you'll see that come back in a different form. I do think you'll see Amazon come back in a different form, but it's a very long cycle business. It takes a lot of time and a lot of upfront investment. And particularly with some of the pharmacies, I think the money they're losing in the front of store is making it difficult to make the investment, for these healthcare organizations in the back of store. And I think CVS is still the wild card on that.
That's true. I mean, within healthcare, let's talk about pharmacy, right? Profit margins aren't quite razor thin, but they are. It isn't easy to flourish and be successful. I mean, there's a reason CVS went out and bought Aetna, right? To be their own provider so that they could have a little bit more control over reimbursement rates. There's a reason that healthcare costs so much in this country, and yet we still see that outcomes aren't as good as other countries. We can talk about that in the next article. I definitely am for more organizations coming in and trying to make a difference, for sure. I just think there needs to be a higher consideration, or just a more careful approach, let's say, right? Just because a large organization acquires another one doesn't necessarily mean that they necessarily need to go together, right? I'm definitely for these partnerships and these, let's say, more cautious approaches, so that we're not getting patients used to a certain level of service for a year or two and then just taking it away. Like, for example, I've been seeing a big push from Amazon, these Amazon pharmacy ads. I'm seeing them all over the place. There's one, for example, that specifically talks about they pose it saying, you should get your grandmother or your mother on it, used to Amazon Pharmacy, so you don't have to wait in line to pick up her prescription. Well, what if we do that and then 2 years later it's gone, right? I mean, how much
So
of an
true.
would that be? I'm just saying. So I'm completely for the partnership. I'm completely for these more cautious approach, and hopefully over time, as these giants are acclimating themselves to the reality and complexity of healthcare, they may then be able to really open up something that's a little bit more resilient on their own.
Yeah, no, I think that makes absolute sense. And you did reference the second article. Let me talk about that a little bit. This is an article from Healthcare Innovation. It's called Our 7.7 Burning Platform, a Stark Moment for U.S. Healthcare. The article makes a number of good points, but the largest one to me was that national healthcare spending for 2023 is estimated to grow at a rate of 7.5%, way in excess of inflation, almost hitting 5 trillion per the Office of the Actuary at CMS. And they also said that health spending between 2023 and 2032 expected to grow at 5.6% and expected to hit almost 8 trillion by 2032. Important points are that the number is higher than forecast last year, and it shows that healthcare as a percentage of GDP will rise from 18.3%, almost 20% by 2032. And if the US economy wasn't actually in a sustained period of expansion, which it's been for about the last, I believe, 4 years, the percentage might not have even been higher. The article makes an excellent point that no matter what kind of great advances we are making in healthcare, thinking about artificial intelligence, value-based care, all the things we referenced before, the aging of the population means that healthcare costs will continue to grow. The article then references if ever there were a burning platform for the healthcare system change, it would be the realization that as a nation, we're going to spend 1/5 of our productive resources or in productive wealth on healthcare. And there was simply no way to overstate the enormity of that figure or the other figures involved in. And I think that's just an excellent point. Elizabeth, I'll throw it to you. Just staggering numbers that continue to grow no matter what we do. I understand as a result of demographics, that will continue to be the case, but there seem to be other factors here at play. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's truly baffling. Those, the human mind literally cannot comprehend such high numbers, but the idea that our healthcare spending is estimated to reach $7.7 trillion by 2032 is simply incredible. And we know it's because we have an aging population, right? We know it's because people post-pandemic are using their healthcare, are taking advantage of their healthcare resources more than they did pre-COVID. We know that, rising chronic disease rates mean that patients are, more likely to use their healthcare that's available to them. I think one angle, right, that could be considered here is that, in addition to, of course, everything going to value-based care, one way that we can address the needs of an aging population, because as we know, fertility rates are going down. The number of babies that are being born isn't necessarily keeping up with the ability to replace our population. So the question is, who's going to take care of our aging population as they grow up? Aside from costs, one thing we can obviously do and encourage legal immigration into this country. I'm an immigrant, and that is one of the really, really high rates of growth in our population that we see, is encouraging that immigration population to come into the United States and, make a life for themselves. In addition to that, I have to say that it's going to take major, major policy changes in order for us to look at healthcare in a completely different way than we have before. I would make the argument that the way our current healthcare system is set up, it's actually set up to actually take advantage of this aging population, right? When we think about our elderly patients who have to live in nursing homes or treatment care facilities, the reality is these facilities cost hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year, right? And they're taking and using up completely a lot of our population's retirement accounts, taking and recalling their homes as collateral and taking away that generational wealth from those families, right? So not only is it extremely expensive, but now we're seeing also a transfer of wealth from the average person to these huge corporations as well. I am a huge advocate as much as possible for removing that profit incentive as much as we can from healthcare, and really overhauling as much as we can our policy so that it's patient first, it's preventative first, and it's about the health of the patient rather than the amount of services that you can get for treating this one person and running them dry, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I think you've got a couple of good points. I mean, I think there's a whole different debate in terms of immigration,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I do think, though, in terms of the point you make in terms of preventive care, doing some work, as you know, I teach in the Master's of Public Health program, and something like 80% of these kind of conditions can be addressed earlier on
Right.
with less expensive treatments. And then the other part you say is all of the money, we're unique in the world if you look at kind of institutionalizing people who, as they get older. And you're starting to see some programs from, Medicare and Medicaid in different states where they are paying caretakers who are caring for their elderly parents. And now you see people who are being paid as caretakers and then also getting certified. So once they are done with that, they can actually go out and take care of other people's parents in the home. And so you have that combined with remote patient monitoring, virtual care, wearables to help decrease the cost in the system. And I think that's one way the system, as you say, needs to look at these things, very differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of incentivizing keeping people at home as long as it's safe and it's possible. I think, as a society, it's just like it's the same conundrum. I think this is a little bit of an aside, but it's the same conundrum I think that new parents have with newborns, right?
Yeah.
Is, daycare is ridiculously expensive, as are nursing home facilities are ridiculously expensive, and the counties and states that are doing it right are the ones that financially motivate couples or families to keep people in the home, right? So the more we can do that, the more I think we can ideally keep the wealth within these families, but also I think actually have better outcomes for these family units for sure.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. So with that, I will wrap it up. A lot of food to chew on there with this week's show. I have a feeling, unfortunately, that this will not be the last show we do on cybersecurity.
Not at all.
But hopefully, we've given you a couple of things to take away from the show. And as I said, we'll post that document. I am Jeff Englander from Healthcare Strategy Bullpen. We help payers and providers adapt and deploy healthcare technology to improve the lives of their patients. We help health tech innovators become more effective in developing and deploying their technology within the healthcare delivery ecosystem. We focus on 4 basic areas: operationalizing data to maximize its analytical value, demonstrating the value and benefits of new applications enabled by digital health, applying digital health technologies to the management of high cost and chronic conditions like we were talking about today, and also gauging and managing the practical, cultural, and technological issues around the social determinants of health. Please check out our latest blog, which was on digital tools for behavioral health, holding up post-COVID, but more needs to be done, on our website. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, whatever you choose to call it. Also on Twitter or X, we are at HealthcarePen. We are under healthcarebullpen.com and also on LinkedIn. Please subscribe to the blog and subscribe to Diagnosing Healthtech. And with that, I will thank everybody and wish you a very happy July 4th and turn it over to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Our show is also sponsored by Redox, the leader in healthcare data interoperability. We provide providers, payers, and digital health organizations with the strongest foundation for shifting data into a digital-first, value-based healthcare. Also, be sure to subscribe to Diagnosing Healthtech, on any podcast platform, or scan the QR code to get updates. From all of us here at Diagnosing Healthtech, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.